One of my favourite stories is a parody on two classic books, seamlessly fused together by Maxwell Conroe, with Alice appearing as the Queen of Hearts in a Hobbit-hole Society. She presently seeks to fight global warming with the help of hookah-smoking caterpillars. Yes, you heard that right. Hookah-smoking caterpillars will help resolve our global warming problem. I am deeply honoured and truly delighted to narrate this lovely story for you, titled Queen of Hearts in a Hobbit-hole by Maxwell Conroe. Preamble. In the long run, the main characters of classic stories may become much better known than their creators. For example, Alice, from Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and the Hobbits, from J.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and its Lord of the Rings sequel. These characters presently have a higher name recognition than their creators. Lately, the retired characters, with their creators long gone, appear to seek out new opportunities to make themselves heard and useful again. Alice, now the Queen of Hearts in a Hobbit-hole Society, seeks to prioritize the fight against global warming. But let's not forget that these stories started with their authors embarking on writing a book series, led by nothing but their inspiration. For example, J.R. Tolkien had painstakingly written the Lord of the Rings sequel between 1937 and 1949, but those books were actually not all published until 1955, many years after Tolkien had written them. And 60 years later, his The Lord of the Rings stories would be released in a film series for a global audience, with enormous success. The prelude to Tolkien's later Lord of the Rings sequel of books, 3 in all, was already set in The Hobbit, written in 1937. That primer already contains all the main characters: Gandalf the wizard who, like Merlin in the ancient King Arthur legend, helps solve problems, and Gollum, who guards the precious magic ring. Somehow, the opening scene of The Hobbit reminds me rather strongly of the atmosphere set by Lewis Carroll in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Let me explain why I make this claim. Tolkien starts his story not with a rabbit, but a hobbit. Each of these creatures inhabits a hole in the ground, and this is how each of these authors draws us into their underground holes. Tucking in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. Tolkien wrote about the physical appearance of the entrance to his hobbit hole. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole painted green and adorned with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hole like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel. The tunnel wound on and on, going fairly but not quite straight into the side of the hill. Lewis Carroll, after describing how Alice became aware of a white rabbit with pink eyes, wearing a waistcoat, and even in possession of a pocket watch, had her running after the enigmatic rabbit, just in time to see it popping down a large rabbit hole under a hedge. In the next moment, Alice too went down the rabbit hole. And here is how Carroll describes the physical appearance of his hole. The rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way, and then dipped suddenly down. After a long and enormous fall down the hole, she softly lands on a heap of dry leaves. The fall was finally over. The rabbit was no longer to be seen. She, Alice, found herself in a long, low hall, which was lit up by a row of lamps hanging from the roof. There were doors all round the hall. She came up on a low curtain, and behind it was a little door, about 15 inches high. The excerpts selected from each author emphasized the similarities in having holes in the ground, with straight tunnels and sections separated by doors. while the inhabitants were respectively a white rabbit with pink eyes in Carroll's book, and a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins in Tolkien's book. In the later sequel to The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins is the key character who is searching for a magic ring relegated to him by Bilbo, who is in fact Frodo's uncle. But from here on, one may argue, the stories take their own fairy tale turns. Carroll focuses entirely on the travails Alice is subjected to, whereas Tolkien's hobbits and dwarves, led by the wizard Gandalf, embark on a long tour through fairy lands. Their mission is to dispose of Frodo's magic ring, such as to avert evil powers will reach and reclaim it first, which would mean they could then enslave the world to their will. The stories of Tolkien and Carroll were written as entertainment for children and adults alike, and remain hugely successful in their fantasy genre. The creations of the late writers have by far outlived their creators. And I found this out for myself, as I will relate to you now.